Hi, I'm Laura Candler from Teaching Resources, and I want to share something with you that I created for my own classroom a number of years ago. I am a former 4th and 5th grade teacher, and back when I first learned about multiple intelligence theory, I looked far and wide for a survey that I could use with my students, and I just couldn't seem to find anything. So I wanted something really quick, simple, something that they could understand. So I developed my own, and then I started sharing it with others. I wanted to kind of walk you through the process of how to administer it, how to score it, and also I wanted to incorporate the recent growth mindset research into discussing the results of the survey. I'm going to assume that you have some knowledge of multiple intelligence theory and a little bit of knowledge about growth mindset, because today I just wanted to focus on how to administer and score the MI survey for kids and how to use the survey results to foster a growth mindset in your students. So let's go ahead and dig in and let me kind of explain to you what it's all about. First of all, I have a couple of different formats for this survey. The one that I will be sharing with you for free is a non-editable PDF, and I call it Getting to Know You Survey. And the reason I did that is because I didn't really want the kids to understand or to start thinking about the word intelligence. If it said multiple intelligence survey, they might have really tried to read too much into it. And I recently created an editable version of the survey that's in PowerPoint format, because you might want to change some of the wording on these statements. And that editable PowerPoint version is in my Multiple Intelligence Theory for Kids book. It's also a part of the webinar that I presented, and I have a bundle of those two resources together, and you can find it there. So let me just kind of explain to you how it's set up so you'll have an understanding of how to score this thing and maybe how to use it. So there are 8 multiple intelligence areas. You can see them if you kind of have to turn sideways, but you can see them across the top of the columns there: naturalist, mathematical logical, verbal linguistic, musical rhythmic, visual spatial, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal. And for each of those 8 areas, I created 3 statements that are indicators that the person might have that particular intelligence area. So I mixed the statements up because I wanted them to just be totally random, but because of the way I mixed them up, the scoring process is a little bit confusing. So let me show you how to administer it and score it. When I gave it to the students, the first thing I asked them to do was to fold it on the dashed line there so that the columns on the right hand side were folded back behind the rest of the survey. So what you end up with is kind of that hot dog fold paper with only the 24 statements visible. I did read the statements aloud to my students, even though they were 5th graders, and these are pretty easy statements. I wanted to read them one at a time so that the kids could rate them, and I'll tell you about that in a second, but also if there's any questions about the wording, then I could clear up those questions. So what they did is they rated each statement from 0 to 5, with 5 being high, according to which of the following are true about you. So for example, I find myself singing or humming many times during the day. Well, that's actually not true for me, so I would put a 1. I love crossword puzzles and other word games, and I do, so 4. And anyways, just go down 0 to 5. You're rating all of the areas. There's 24 statements. So that's what the kids do. I actually collected these at this point, and we did not score them until later, until I did a little mini MI theory unit, and then we came back and scored them when they had a little bit more understanding of what those different areas meant. But when you get to the part of the scoring process, when you get to the part of the administration where you're scoring the survey, you have the kids unfold the survey and then transfer each of their rating numbers over to the box that's outlined on the same row. So, for example, the first one about singing and humming, number 1, you just transfer it straight over to the outline box. And then crossword puzzles, there was a 4 there, it gets transferred to that box. The 3 gets transferred to that box, and so on. They just go straight down the paper and they just transfer. My kids used a ruler or the edge of a piece of paper to keep it kind of straight. If you notice, each column represents one type of intelligence, and what they do at this point after they get it filled out is they simply add the 3 numbers that's in each column, and they write the total score for each MI area in the bottom row above its kid-friendly term. So if you're familiar with multiple intelligence theory, a lot of educators have kid-friendly wording. So mathematical logical is math smart, verbal linguistic is word smart, naturalist is nature smart, and so on. So those words are right down there at the bottom of the survey. The highest possible score in any area is 15 because there's 3 statements and the highest you can get for each one is 5. So I generally felt like scores above 10 represent strengths and scores below 5 show areas where maybe growth is needed if the student, desires that. So that's the paper format. That's my original format that I came up with many years ago when I first learned about MI theory. But more recently, some teachers have asked me for a digital version and especially a Google Doc version. Some have told me that they need to be using Google Classrooms for everything. So it took me a while to come up with something. I actually had to reorganize the whole survey. So I have an editable Google Doc version and an Excel file that if you don't want them to take it online but you want it on a computer. So what I had to do to make this work, the scoring process was the difficult aspect for me. So what I ended up doing was just grouping the 3 statements together into sections. So the students go down and rate each statement and add the numbers to find their score for each of the multiple intelligence areas. So for section 1, that would be a score of 12, and they would go through each section. Then to score the survey, you click down at the bottom of the Google Doc or the Excel spreadsheet, and I have a second tab that has the scoring chart. So you click to show the scoring chart. The scoring chart has all of the multiple intelligence areas and also the smart words that many educators use right next to it. And then the total scores from each section are transferred to the corresponding sections on the scoring chart. Now that you have these completed, the students have done them, and you've scored them, it's time to kind of figure out what are you going to do with these results. In particular, I'm thinking about, with recent research into growth mindset, how MI theory and growth mindset work together. Some educators feel like MI theory is out. It's been around almost 40 years, and growth mindset is much more recent. And when growth mindset came along, many educators were kind of like saying, well, MI theory is no longer relevant. But I totally disagree. I actually think that the two of these work really, really well together. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a moment. So I'm not going to go into MI theory, but hopefully you are familiar with Dr. Howard Gardner's work. His book, Frames of Mind, is where he introduced this concept, and he broadened our view of intelligence because we used to think of it as being mostly like math or verbal skills. But he identified intelligence as being the ability to solve problems or create products that are valued in one or more cultural settings. Anyways, the whole topic's really fascinating, but he's come up with 8 originally, then he's added a few others, but the 8 that I use in my book and in my resources are really the ones that most teachers use with students. But some people felt like because he talked about us having different multiple intelligence areas, that he thought that we were born this way and we couldn't change it. And that's actually not true if you read into his work. But just a few little tidbits about growth mindset research. This was the work pioneered by Dr. Carol Dweck. And she came up with the idea of growth mindset and fixed mindset. She noticed two different mindsets within people. And her work reveals how cultivating a growth mindset can lead to success and happiness, not just in school, but in life. And that's really, people who are happy usually have a growth mindset. They accept challenges. They don't mind failing because they know they can learn from their failures and then move on. But the opposite of that is the fixed mindset, where people are very close-minded. They feel that some people are smart and other people are not smart, and so on. And in her work, she discovered that praising students for being smart can actually promote a fixed mindset, which is not a good thing. So if we tell kids that they're smart, then they may not want to try something new because they are concerned that we won't think they're smart anymore. And because of this piece, I think this is one of the pieces where some teachers felt like Dr. Carol Dweck's work was opposing or different from MI theory, because in MI theory we talk about, being word smart or math smart or whatever. But honestly, Dr. Gardner he actually never used the word smart in the way that we use it. That's kind of something that educators have done, and he never anywhere stated that he felt like intelligence was fixed. He felt that you could grow and learn and become more intelligent. So it's really worth digging into, and that's what I wanted to share with you. I have a professional development webinar called MI Theory, Mindset, and Motivation, where it's actually a two-part webinar because there was so much in it I had to divide it into two sessions. And in the first one, I get into MI theory, what it means, how to use it in the classroom, and then the second part is all about growth mindset and bringing it all together. And if you're interested in learning more about how to watch that webinar, you can go to www.mitheoryandgrowthmindset.com. That actually takes you to a page on my website where you can get information about the webinar. Okay, where do you go from here? What are the next steps after you have the survey results? So I think the most important thing you can do is teach your students about MI theory and growth mindset. They need to know what these terms mean and really have an understanding of it. I do have this MI Theory and Growth Mindset bundle that has a book and the webinar that I just shared with you, and I think it will help you prepare to teach your students. There's all kinds of materials that you can use to do that. And also think it's important to discuss the survey as a way to learn about our strengths and areas for growth, but we really need to keep in mind the growth mindset piece. And we definitely don't want to imply to students that if they scored low in a certain area, that's just the way they are. They were born that way. They're not ever going to be smart in that area. Dr. Gardner never meant it to be taken that way, and we just need to make sure that when we are presenting it to students, we kind of let them know this is sort of a snapshot of how you learn best right now. If you do this survey again a year from now, you're probably going to get different results because you'll grow in different areas. The other thing to remember is this is just a survey that I made up for my students, and I based it on research that I read, but it only has 3 sentences, 3 statements per MI area, and those MI areas are very complex. So it's a very simplified survey. It's not something I would send home to parents. It's not something I would use as a diagnostic tool to try to identify where somebody's weak so that they could get like extra help in that area. It's more of a self-reflection tool. And then I guess the final thing is to make sure that when you're planning your lessons, you plan lessons that incorporate MI theory and growth mindset. So you want to think about reaching all types of learners, and you want to give kids an opportunity to display their growth mindset and to face challenges and to tackle those challenges and be enthusiastic about them. This is just kind of a peek at the resources that I mentioned earlier. If you're interested in getting them, you can go to mitheoryandgrowthmindset.com. That will actually just redirect you to a page on my website, and that's where you can find the free survey that I mentioned also. So you can give this a try and see how it works out for you. So once again, if you go to mitheoryandgrowthmindset.com, that's actually going to redirect you over to a page on my website, Teaching Resources, which is at lauracandler.com. That's another way to get there. If you go to lauracandler.com, you can click on the strategies link at the top and look for MI Theory and Growth Mindset. I hope you find that survey to be a useful tool, and that it's something that will help your kids get a better understanding, and you get a better understanding of how they learn best.